Hey everyone, this is James, fitness and sports instructor here with CFB Kingston. And today's video, we're going to be going through a quick sports workshop video on a throwing mechanics and warm-up. So before we get into any more description of that, just a quick reminder for your safety, just have a look at the disclaimer that's located in the description section of this video below. So what we're going to be talking about today for this sports workshop specifically is just a little bit of like tips and going through some things to help with warming up your throwing mechanics for any kind of throwing activity. So when we're talking about throwing activity from a sports perspective, primarily we'd be looking at baseball, softball, something of that sort. That kind of throwing, but this type of warm-up would also be applicable to any other kind of throwing, with no head motion, traditional throwing motion, so that would be also football as well if you're tossing around football. So before we talk about the warm-up, we're going to talk a little bit about the mechanics and where the importance of this warm-up kind of comes from. So a big point of stress with throwing mechanics that you're going to find is at the fulcrum point of the throwing mechanics and of the throwing motion. And the fulcrum point that we're going to be talking about, and this is the part that is really important to warm up and to avoid injury, is the medial portion of your elbow. So it's your medial elbow ligaments on the inside portion of this elbow. So that is the, again, it's the fulcrum point of a throwing motion. And the reason is for that, when you do an overhand throw, the power is generated through your rotator cuff and through your shoulder muscles, as well as some of your rotational core strength, which we're going to talk about later as well. But primarily, the power comes from this portion, so from your body through the shoulder, and is released, the power is released through the hand. So what that means is the fulcrum point between those two, from your hands, your shoulder, and your body, is your elbow. So your elbow is that fulcrum point. If you're familiar with physics, that's that middle portion between two lever portions. So there's a lot of stress that goes through that fulcrum point, because that stress is taking the power from here to release it here, it has to drive through here. And ligament structures are a little bit harder to warm up sometimes. They are a little bit more sometimes sustainable to injury because they aren't a flex contract tissue like your muscles. So they're a little bit different in terms of the way the tissue works. So you have to be a little more specific in terms of how you warm those up. And it's also very important to warm those up as well. So again, that medial elbow portion is a very important factor in terms of what you're warming up. A lot of times when people warm up throwing, they spend a lot of time, again, warming up like the shoulder structures and the rotator, and then just going through the throwing motion to warm up, but they really don't focus on that elbow portion. And some of you may have experienced this in the past, where maybe you go out to a game, let's say you're softball game, baseball game, whatever it is, you get there a little late, you do a couple full tosses, light just to kind of warm up, or maybe warm up the shoulder a little bit, but then you get into the actual game, and a situation happens where you really have to put a lot of muscle into the throw, and you feel that strain on that ligament. It's not fun. A lot of times with that strain on that ligament, when you do that really hard throw without getting that proper warm-up, you're going to find that tingling sensation that runs down to your hand sometimes. And generally, the rest of the game, you're going to be feeling that every time you go to throw because you've got that strain already built in there. And it's hard to warm it up once you've already got the strain in that elbow joint already inflamed and it's already unhappy at that point. And that'll carry over for a while too. It usually takes a couple of days for that to kind of simmer down. It's not fun, so hopefully this quick little tip here kind of that we're going to go through can help you to avoid that. So again, to warm up that elbow portion, just a general warm up for that, you can go through. So again, a lot of times when people do warm up for throwing, they focus on kind of like shoulder rotation movements, which are great. Again, that's not something to take away. You definitely want to keep those in there. But to kind of warm up that elbow portion, an easy one is to do that same sort of rotation, but through the elbow joint, moving through internal and external rotation. So you do what we call elbow circles, where you kind of lock in the upper arm portion, and then you rotate through that lower arm portion. So just be rotating the one direction, and then rotating the other direction. And when you're rotating, just trying to open and close that arm joint into those different ranges, into that internal and external rotation. So you just do a couple of those. That's just a very easy way to kind of just start off. But that's just warming up the actual joint portion. It's not very specific to the actual throwing motion. So this is where we get into the next piece. So yeah, a lot of times people will kind of just jump in and just start, full rotational throw, throw into a partner or whatnot. But an extra step to add in there before we get to that full rotation, which can help to really warm up that elbow joint, is to do a squared up throw where you take out all of the lower body, upper body rotation, and you just focus on throwing through the hand and the shoulder. So you kind of lock in, square to the individual that you're throwing with, or if you're, if you don't really have a person to throw with, you might be using the wall, but ideally you want to throw with another person back and forth. But again, keep your hips, your feet, your upper body square, and from this position here, just rotating through this really basic throwing mechanic of just through the arms. So you kind of lock in, rotate through, right? So it's just this really simple range, really limited. So you take out some of the power that you generate generally through that rotation that you're going to get through the body. So you're taking a little bit of power down. But the other thing too is you're focusing really solely on that elbow portion and really trying to get a little bit of time to let it warm up before you start increasing the load demand on that fulcrum and on that elbow joint portion, right? So because you're taking out that load demand from the legs and the upper body, just focusing on the arm, now you get a chance to be able to get warmed up, a little bit looser, and you're going to avoid that risk of that inflammation. So with this, again, with this position here, so again, just to reiterate, feet square, hips square, upper body square, and just rotating through the arm portion for those throws. So if you're doing a throw warm-up, this would be the main one to kind of focus on. And really take some time on this one. So do lots of tosses. They're nice and easy because the tosses aren't going to be very far. You're taking a lot of power out by just going through that arm portion, so you're only going to be pretty close. So the throws are going to be pretty short, so you can be cycling back and forth real quick. And because again, you're taking a lot of that power out, you can kind of quickly just keep cycling through those real easy non-rotational tosses back and forth. And with this one here, you just want to slowly increase your velocity, right? So, start off the first 10, 15, 20, just at a really light pace. And then as you progress into some of those later stages, start adding a little bit more velocity to that throw. Really kind of load up the power through the shoulder, feel it out, release it. So that would be kind of like your first step. So again, with that one, because it's short but quick, take lots of throws there. So like 20 to 50 tosses, back and forth, whatever kind of feels right. You're gonna feel that elbow start to loosen up. So from there, to kind of start working on your timing and adding that in, at this point, again, keep your feet square as you can to try and lock those in. And now, work on a little bit of like the body rotation without moving your feet. So this is gonna help with your timing while also gradually increasing that load demand through the shoulder, elbow, into the hand, right? So you're just gradually increasing load demand instead of, again, jumping right from that squared up throw into a full rotation. We'll keep the feet square, hips square, or hips can rotate, just keep your feet square, so try to move the feet through the throw, and then again, just the rotation through the upper body to kind of work on your timing as you throw. So that again is the aim, is to move from a throw with no rotation just through the arm. You add that little bit of hip and upper body rotation to slowly and gradually increase that load demand. So you're going to have to increase possibly the distance that you're throwing to the person. So these throws are going to take a little bit longer, and they're going to have a little bit more power associated with them. So you might want to cut the load down on this throwing mechanic. So you might want to cut it down to maybe like 15 to 30 of these throws. Again, feet square, just rotating through the upper body. And then you're going to move into that last stage, which is where you're going to get into your full throwing mechanics and slowly increasing your velocity. So again, the full mechanics would be a full step through full body rotation, right? So a full step, moving that through. And that's important to put in there as well, for sure, because you want to work through those mechanics, and especially just making sure that your timing is there, right? So you spend that time in that short range motion, you just want to make sure you take the time to gradually increase that load demand again. So again, we move through the 3 stages. So the first stage, you have that lowest load demand just through the arm. Then you move up, you have a little bit of rotational power, so you increase your load demand. Now when you get into that full throwing mechanic of step through throw, where you're going to step, add some power through the lower body, transfer through the hip, through the upper body, through the arm, through the elbow. That's going to be your max load demand. But by this point, because you've gradually worked it up, you have lots of tosses in, your elbow should be nice and warmed up. You're going to be getting some power through that elbow, and you don't have to worry about any of that tweak or that inflammation that sometimes you get if that elbow's not fully ready to go. And another thing to keep in mind with that too, with the nature of a lot of throwing mechanic sports, specifically baseball and sometimes football, depending on the situation, if you do have some time, some downtime in between, so let's say you're an outfielder and maybe you kind of rotated through, so you weren't in an inning, and now you've been sitting for a bit, and there's a long stretch where you guys are back and haven't thrown it a bit. Doing that so you've already established your mechanics, you already have your timing, but just doing a couple of those light, full arm, or just the arm tosses, taking out that rotation, that light low tossing, can help just kind of keep that elbow warmed up. And it's a real easy toss that you can do. You don't need a lot of space, you don't need you and a partner to be, 50, 60, 100 feet apart to, get some, launching throws in there. You can just be 5 feet apart, just quickly toss it back and forth, get some of that movement back in that elbow, so that when you head back out to the field and you got to launch one, you're not worried about tweaking that elbow portion. So that's just a handy way to work that in a game, especially if you find that you've been sitting for a while, or it's a super cold day, you start to tighten up or anything like that. It's just a good way to kind of just warm that elbow back up so you can get out to the field, have a big toss, and then next thing you know, you got that elbow information again, and you can't throw the rest of the game. So again, that squared up non-rotation throw just through the arm can really help to really lock in the load on the elbow, but with a reduced load, right? So you are really focusing on a lot of mechanics on that elbow specifically and putting that all through there. But because of that light load, when you're taking out all the power from the lower body hips and upper body rotation, the load is light, even though it's really honed in, so it's going to help that elbow to kind of get moved around and get loosened up and ready to go for some of those bigger throws with a little bit more power. All right, so again, right, that quick, easy 3-step process, just to reiterate, anywhere from 20 to 50 or maybe a few more tosses with your feet square, hips square, upper body square, through the arm, move to that next stage, 10 to 30 tosses, feet still locked in, but adding a little bit of rotation and load through the upper body and the hips with some rotation, and then from there, you're going to move to that last stage where you're going to do some full body mechanic throw, your full throwing motion to finish off that warm-up, where again, with this one, you don't even have to do a lot of tosses, anywhere from 5 to 15, and once you get that timing down, so that full step through throw for distance or power that you really want to emphasize, that timing and figuring out where you want your release points, just to get that down right before you get to some full throwing. So that 3-step process can really help a lot if you are someone that has had that happen in the past, or even if you haven't, it'll happen once. It always happens to everyone. So that 3 little step process where you kind of gradually build that load on that elbow joint can really have a great effect on your, not only with injury reduction, but also helps with the throwing mechanics as well, to kind of build in some of that load. So that can really help to improve your throwing mechanics right before, and it has a huge impact on reducing the incidence and the chance of having that really bad inflammation in that elbow joint. Because again, when we're working through that elbow joint is that fulcrum point of the power. It's the main part that takes all that power being built up through your rotation, through the shoulder, and then releases through the hand, all comes through that elbow joint. So you really want to make sure that you get that elbow joint warmed up. So hopefully you're able to use that, give that a shot. And again, your drill thing here is just to focus on that warm-up to try and reduce that risk of injury there. If you have any comments or feedback, I invite you to throw a comment in the comment section. Thank you for tuning in for this quick little informational session here again on warming up for our throwing mechanics. And just a reminder, if you like the content, give us a subscribe to the channel by hitting the notification button below. Again, I am James, fitness and sports instructor with CFB Kingston, and thank you again for watching today.
PSP Kingston, the health and wellness provider for the military community.